This past week has been quite eventful, both good and bad. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. We'll start off with the good stuff. As you can tell, we have parts rolling in for the race Jeep, the fuel cell, seats, harnesses, and a bunch of DOM tubing so we can finally start building this roll cage. One thing we were waiting on is, some of these larger parts, the seats and the fuel cell, to figure out how tight and where to actually run the tubing for this cage. But we'll get to that in a little bit. What happened this past week? So I went down to Texas, down to South Padre Island for a week there to spend with the Coast Guard Reserve. Now on the drive down there, we blew up the Gladiator rear axle. Cassie bought a new Jeep LJ and we're selling the Bronco. So there's a lot to catch you guys up to speed on. Take a look at what happened with the Gladiator and what we're gonna do moving forward. So let's go back in time on the drive down to South Padre Island and see what happened. The rear axle failure. Well, it appears that the Jeep Gladiator has a broken rear differential. I'm heading down from Oklahoma City all the way down to South Padre Island. About halfway through the trip outside of Corpus Christi, Texas. It's been a few hours in the Jeep so far, going about 80, speed limit 75 through the most part of Texas. And out of the blue, the rear end just starts screaming. So I let off the gas a little bit. Noise goes away. Get back on it, the noise is back even worse. This is some of the worst rear end noise I've ever heard in my life. So I pull over in the middle of nowhere and go ahead and touch the rear diff and it is smoking hot. So my first thought is, hey, maybe somehow we're out of fluid. The axle seals looked fine. We didn't have any oil dripping. Diff cover did have 2 bolts missing, but no signs of oil anywhere. So I call a buddy of mine who's stationed in Corpus Christi, which is about 40 minutes away, and he tells me to check out and see if I'm near Corpus Christi Ring and Pinon, CC Ring and Pinon. It turns out I was 3 miles away. So I let the axle cool down, hobbled over there, we pull it in the shop, rear axle's toast. So all of this is done without even opening up the rear axle, but by feeling the bearings, the heat from them, and you could actually feel quite a bit of movement, like backlash out of spec in the yoke. The pinion bearing didn't have any in and out movement. It almost sounded like we lost a complete bearing carrier cap. And whenever you got on the gas, the ring gear was spinning and hitting the pinion in a way where it's not supposed to. So ended up pulling the rear drive shaft, which is a very simple job, and they charged half an hour of labor, which was $103. So they proceeded to ask me if I wanted them to go ahead and change out the bearings, re-gear the Jeep, and I didn't even want to imagine what they were going to charge for that, knowing that a half hour was $100. So went ahead, pulled the rear drive shaft, and we are cruising another 2 hours down to South Padre Island in Fort High. So all of the load is on the front differential. So we're taking it a little bit slow. I know the speed limit's 70. Luckily we have some trucks going through here pretty slow. So stopping every 30 minutes to let the front diff kind of cool down, make sure we don't experience a similar issue with the front. But it is very, very strange that the rear diff went like that. We weren't towing, we weren't off-roading, something just let go. I've been hearing a lot of horror stories within the past couple years, quality control going down, and mostly just this design. The JLs and JTs with Yukon kits are experiencing a ton of issues. A lot of people get the whine around 50. Now in my case, we're going 50, I don't hear a whine, but there is some type of quality control issue with the Yukon bearings, especially the ones that are designed for the JL and JT. Hopefully when we get down here to South Padre, we can open up the rear diff and see what caused damage, but luckily we're able to actually continue on the way. So if it is a spun carrier bearing, there's a chance that it actually wiped out the entire axle housing, which means the axle is useless, and we would either have to replace it with another factory Dana 44 or the M220, whatever they call it, or use the time to upgrade to 1-ton axles, or like a semi-float 60 rear that still retains the 5-on-5 bolt pattern, so we can leave the front, which we get an upgrade in the rear, still match the 513s, and everything's bolt-on for the most part. So hopefully the Jeep will make it the rest of the way with no issues. We have the RCVs in the front, which are helping out. We got asking a lot of the front axle right now, but no issues so far, knock on wood. Well, we have made it to South Padre Island. At low speeds, I can still hear some rumbling. So there's something not happy in there, but we have made it. Hopefully have a chance to pull the rear diff and inspect it, but I'm just glad we made it. Time to go to work tomorrow. The drain plug, or the fill plug on the diff, and there's junk all over it. Oh, let's see what kind of goodies are inside. Oh yeah, we got chunks. We got chunks falling out. Oh. Wonderful. Need a flashlight. Well, to my surprise, the carrier bearing is fine. It is the pinion. It's just completely gone. So I don't even know if the GoPro can pick it up. Let's see. Hold it real still. There's a chunk missing there, and there's a chunk missing on the bottom. There's another one. Chip up there. Yep, pinion gear's toast. So after pulling the diff cover and inspecting the rear diff, it was pretty obvious what the issue was. I actually dug through the gear oil to grab these two. There were a lot of other chunks in there. But these, as you can tell, like the pinion tooth itself, the contact is fine. It actually sheared off from the pinion head. Now typically this happens when you have a ton of horsepower or you're just really beating and shock loading your axle. Neither of those are the case with the Gladiator. We're running the 3.6, which doesn't put out that much horsepower. And for the most part, we only take the Gladiator on, mildly challenging off-road obstacles. So in my mind, I kind of lead towards quality control, manufacturing defect, but there also could be the case of improper setup. Now, I don't think that's the case because we've had these gears installed for a little over 3 years, probably 30 or 40,000 miles on them. And if there was a setup issue, we would have known about this a lot quicker. But either way, I don't want this to turn into a Yukon bash. I'm running their products in the JK, their front zip locker, the rear grizzly locker, the gears, and I've used their parts before. They're usually top notch. I think the issue is with the JL and JT platform and those gear sets. The reason I bring that up is because there have been a lot of other people that have ran into a similar issue. I posted a picture of these on my Instagram story and I had about 8 people respond saying that the exact same thing happened to their Jeeps, mostly JLs or JTs, with Yukon gear sets. Just out of the blue, pinion gears blowing up. So who really knows? Now I did call Yukon and explain the situation, but unfortunately they were pretty firm on their 1-year warranty on gears unless you purchase their Yes plan, which is kind of, hey, no matter what happens, we'll replace it. I did not do that, and now here we are stuck with a broken set of gears. But after finding the damage, I decided to put new gear oil in it, put everything back together, still no rear drive shaft, and head home to Oklahoma with the Jeep in front wheel drive. On the way home, swung by Houston, Texas to Oddball Motorsports to pick up this fuel cell back here. So this is an RCI 32-gallon fuel cell. The guys over at Oddball Motorsports, very knowledgeable in regards to racing. So picked up the fuel cell, headed back home, and now here we are. So I think the plan is, you know, there's two options. We can either swap in a Dana 60 bolt-in axle from Advanced Driveline, you know, 513's already set up. We get the bigger pinion gear, the bigger ring gear from the 60, which is gonna be better for towing, a lot stronger off-road, but it does come at a higher price, and a lot of my Jeep cash is being swept away from the race Jeep. So what I think we're gonna do is order a set of Revolution gears, 513s for the rear, put those in here in the shop, hopefully be in and out in a day, and call the Jeep good. So with all of that being said, now it's time to take a look at Cassie's new LJ. So Cassie has added yet another Jeep to the fleet. This is a 2005 Jeep Wrangler LJ. LJs are extremely nice Jeeps, very daily driver friendly, and if you keep them stock for the most part, they ride really good. So the plan is to keep this one fairly daily drivable and replace the Bronco. So as you can tell, the race Jeep is over here. We had to move it out of the way because we have quite a few things to fix on this thing. 178,000 miles. It was used as a tow, like a towed Jeep behind an RV, and for the most part, this thing is just super clean. Runs really good. Beautiful condition. Now, the only bad thing is that it is a salvage title. Over on the passenger side is where things start getting a little bit interesting. But for the most part, it doesn't look like it's too bad at all. So there's no frame damage. The tub does, as you can tell, has been smacked right here, but I think we're gonna be able to put corner armor on it, cover it up, cut this out or pull it out the best we can. But more importantly, the rear axle got bent. So the previous owner, the guy who bought it, put a new axle shaft in there thinking it was just the shaft that was bent, but more than likely the way this thing got smacked, it actually probably bent the axle tube. But luckily, Cassie's old LJ axle, her original Dana 44, but before swapping over to the JK axles, was down in North Carolina. So her dad boxed it up, actually threw it in with Outlaw Off-Road, and they came out here to Mid-America in Jay, Oklahoma to do a race. So we swooped by there, grabbed the axle. I spent yesterday grinding it, cleaning it up, painting it, and getting it ready to go in here. So right now, there's no rear drive shaft, upper control arms are out. Like, there definitely was some issues with the rear suspension. So we're gonna take the Jeep up on the lift today, kind of take a look under there and see what all happened and how bad the damage is. I'm hoping we can throw a new stock Dana 44 in, throw some upper control arms in, and then take this thing for a spin on the road and see how it does. Now, we have a ton of work to do on this Jeep, but for the price that we got it at, a fairly clean LJ with the hard top, nice interior, engine and trans run good. Only thing is just the body damage in the rear axle. We got this thing at such a steal. It's kind of a no-brainer not to do it. So we have a lot of work to, you know, catch this thing up to speed and become a daily driver. So first things first is get it on the lift, pull the rear axle out, and make sure there are no more hidden issues. So while we're moving the lug nuts on the passenger side, I actually had to break off 3 of the lug nuts and the studs. They were just completely stripped and they were coming off completely off axis. So they're all loose. For some reason, this thing is stuck on there pretty good. I'm gonna have to whack the crap out of this thing. So the studs are actually bent. Like you can see that stud rubbing the bottom, that one's centered. This one's up, this one's down. So the studs like got bent. There we go. So I got the LJ all buttoned up, put back together, and Cassie's actually been driving it for about 3 days, to and from work, and she loves it. No complaints, and it's driving nice. So we slid the new Dana 44 under it from her old LJ, same gear ratio, directly bolt in. That one did have a locker. It's a lunchbox kind of automatic style locker, which is fine for daily driving. Typically they do make a little bit of noise, but that one I've never heard a peep out of it. So we also had to change out and put some new upper control arms in. Mike had some stock ones. We changed out one of the lower control arms because the bushing was shot inside of the arm, swapped an older style or just a stock one in, had to get a new rear shock, threw a drive shaft in it, bled the brakes, took it for a drive, and the rear calipers were seized up. That's most likely because that axle, Cassie's old axle, was sitting out in a yard in North Carolina for 3 years, so that's to be expected. We swapped in the old calipers from the bent axle onto the LJ, took it for a drive, and it's been good ever since. Now, the last thing we need to do is kind of focus on the body damage, and there's a few different ways, a few different plans, and I want to hear from you guys. The first would be to cut out all of the banged up metal. So kind of do a comp cut in the rear and then put normal, typical corner armor on it. Now, the downside is a few of those places, there won't be bolts there to hold it in, but with some thick corner armor, it should be enough to hold it in place and just kind of leave the bolt not attached to anything, just there for visual looks. The second, take it to a body shop, and I'm assuming pay them $2 or $3 grand to fix it. Or third, find an old tub, TJ or LJ, and just cut that entire section on and welded it. But I wanna hear from you guys in case any of you guys have any great ideas. But that is about it for this video. The Revolution gears are ordered. They should be here soon, so we'll pull the JT in the shop, do once again another gear install video, and then finally, hopefully, come back and start working on the race Jeep. I've been messing around with some roll cage software because you know, I'm not a professional roll cage builder. I don't have that much experience. I've never built my own roll cage. I've helped out and I've worked on other people's, but I've never, from start to finish, built a roll cage. And I don't want to make an instructional video for you guys, but there is a lot of easy stuff that you can learn at home and do research on to be able to build your own cage. So I've been messing around with some Bentech software. This is just one of the very first cages I've kind of designed on here. You know, I've only been doing this for a day and a half, so don't give me too hard of a time. But it's actually really interesting to be able to go in here and design your own roll cage, you know, not only structure, but kind of style as well. Now, this software is gonna be super nice. It was like 300 bucks, but we can actually go through and click individual parts. So like this hoop right here, whenever it's time, because we can actually come in here and select a part. Let's say we wanna make this hoop right here. We're gonna select it, driver side hoop, part details. It's gonna pull up that part right there. And then we can come in here and visually see what bends we need to make. So the illustration will show you what bend to make, how to rotate it, and it is all in this software. It even comes with an option to print out a template to put at the end of the tube for your notches and cutouts. Man, this is gonna make it super simple. But that was my week, caught up to speed. There was a lot going on. I wanted to make sure, number one, that the LJ was good for Cassie to drive because the Gladiator's down. And earlier I mentioned we're selling the Bronco. There's no crazy story behind that. I'm just not in love with it. It's been a great vehicle. We've put 46,000 miles on it, done nothing than oil changes and cleaned it, and there's been no issue. So it's a solid vehicle. I'm not in love with it. Cassie's not in love with it. And at this point, all it is a glorified daily driver for us. So why have something that we can sell for the price that we've bought it at? There's no reason to keep it. So we're ditching it. It's been fun. See you later, Ford Bronco. But it's really just not that much to love after driving it for 46,000 miles.